Canada will spend $1.3 billion on securing its border with the United States, an investment to stave off tariff threats from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Here's what the money would do. CBC reporting it would strengthen 24/7 surveillance of the U.S.-Canadian border, including outfitting the Royal Canadian Mounted Police with helicopters, drones, and mobile surveillance towers, and create a new strike force. More drug-sniffing dogs would be at the border as well. The money was announced as Ottawa released its fall economic statement yesterday. It aims to implement stricter bail and sentencing laws and take assault-style weapons off the street. Trump has said 25% tariffs are coming against Canada if it doesn't improve border security and stop the huge flow of drugs and illegal immigrants into the U.S. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said Monday the looming tariffs are the greatest threat to the Canadian economy right now, and that hundreds of thousands of jobs could be affected if they are, in fact, enacted. The $1.3 billion in spending and the tariff threats could come as Canada's debt balloons. Monday's economic statement shows that deficit at $62 billion. Remember, leading up to the release, former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland repeatedly said that the deficit would come in at $40 billion. Freeland quit as Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau's cabinet yesterday, just before the economic data was released, saying that she and Trudeau do not see eye to eye and that he wanted to replace her as finance minister. The surprise resignation put Ottawa into what politicians called chaos Monday. Others calling for Trudeau to resign or call for a federal election. Among them, Michael Barrett, a Conservative member of Parliament representing the Thousand Islands.
The phantom finance minister posted a $62 billion devastating deficit that Canadians are going to be paying for generations. These Liberals have absolutely lost control, and this flailing prime minister doesn't have the confidence of his cabinet, of his caucus, of Canadians. When's he going to call a carbon tax election?
And following Freeland's resignation and the economic data showing Canada's increasing debt, it is affecting the value of the loonie. For the first time since the onset of the COVID pandemic, the Canadian dollar dipped below 70 cents U.S.